Hi, everybody. This is going to be a long slideshow on arguing. It's kind of a borderline slideshow between this section on analysis and our next section or unit on argument. Because when you write a thesis, you're always writing an argument, whether it's for a literary analysis, an analysis of an ad, whether you're writing a proposal or creating a profile of somebody, or of course, arguing a position for a persuasive essay. Pretty much every kind of thesis driven essay has argumentative aspects to it. So, in this chapter, we'll be discussing how to analyze something through argument, as well as sort of introducing you to the idea of argument for when you write your own persuasive essay. So I already mentioned this in the introduction slide, but I'll go ahead and read some of these ideas from this slide on the PowerPoint. The question is, why study argument for an analysis essay? And of course, in writing an analysis, as I mentioned earlier, you are crafting a particular interpretation about something, whether it's written or visual. And so, in interpreting the ad from your own perspective, you're creating an argument. Most people will probably agree with your interpretation, and there aren't, a million possibilities when you look at an ad for McDonald's attempting to persuade you to go there for free Wi-Fi. It's not as if you're proposing something on your own. However, you're still providing your interpretation of how that ad is persuasive, or what the ad tells us about culture or society or McDonald's or ourselves in some way. Again, for your visual ad, you are analyzing its features from your perspective. You could be analyzing whether it's persuasive. You could be analyzing how it works to suggest a particular idea. You could be analyzing its place in culture or society. And regardless of how you analyze, you are crafting a thesis and support for it, which is a type of argument. So the first part of considering argument is a claim. And a claim is your thesis statement, but just one part of it. Often, but not always, your claim is part of your thesis statement. Your claim can be your entire thesis statement as well. And we'll talk about that in a minute, because we move from the idea of a claim, because you're claiming something, you're making a claim. You're not stating a fact, you're asserting something. You're not telling us 100% that it's true. We're going to move from claim to reason to evidence later in the slideshow. A claim is a statement that reasonable people may disagree about. Essentially, what can be argued. So, what cannot be argued? Matters of fact, for instance. The Brooklyn Nets won 3 NBA playoff games in their series with the Bucks. They lost last night, so they're going to have to play a final game on Saturday to determine who goes to the next round. What also cannot be argued? Matters of faith, religious faith, for instance. There's no way to really argue that based on people's individual faiths and religions. And then finally, matters of personal taste that cannot be changed in any way. So if you wholeheartedly believe that Crocs are the ugliest shoes ever, there's really no way to make a claim about that. That's really personal taste. But you could make a claim about shoes in some way. You could make a claim that even though you love high-heeled shoes, they should be minimized or even banned from workplaces because of the way they harm people's feet. So that would be a claim about shoes. Remember, a claim is a statement that can be argued that reasonable people may disagree about. And a claim can be qualified. In the chapter 36 slideshow, I already talked about qualifiers. So these are all elements of a claim. Now, after you write your claim or your thesis, which we've already talked about, then you have to add reasons. And reasons are support for your claim or thesis. And look on page 400 and 401 in our book, where it discusses how reasons can usually be linked to your claim with the word because. So, for instance, your claim for the McDonald's ad could be something like, the McDonald's ad for free Wi-Fi works because of its color and cultural values. So those would be the two reasons, color and cultural values, that you use to analyze why the McDonald's ad works. Another claim could be, McDonald's is so entrenched in our culture that we immediately recognize the slogan, colors, and symbols. And because of those elements, we are drawn into the ad. So the claim comes at the end of this sentence, we are drawn into the ad. And the reasons are because of the slogan, colors, and symbols. So ultimately, your thesis incorporates the claim and reasons. It doesn't have to include all reasons when you're actually writing the thesis sentence, but doing so helps guide the reader. So if you would like to write a thesis with the claims attached to it, that's perfectly fine. You can use a because clause in your thesis. You don't have to. You can make the claim, especially if it's a long, complex sentence, and then the reasons are the individual paragraphs throughout your paper that support the claim. After reasons in the chain of argument, we have evidence. So we start with a claim, we add reasons, and then we add evidence. A thesis-driven paper, such as an analysis, uses the evidence to prove the thesis. And in an analysis, the evidence comes from the ad itself, as well as any other knowledge you might have about the topic. You're not doing research for this. You're assuming that it's a print ad, like I told you, and that it was created by a firm a firm of designers, ad designers, people who major in advertisement in a department of communications at a college, or they advertise in graphic design. Major, not advertise, but major in graphic design or advertisement. These are the people who created the ad. The ad will be analyzed from your perspective, and you know that it was distributed in magazines and in print, newspapers, magazines that people, around the world saw. So there are three general types of evidence or proof, and you may have heard of these in your high school English classes. You may not have heard of them before, but they're things that are honestly common sense when you're creating a thesis-driven argument or analysis paper. But they are divided into three different segments, and it's important for you to know all three of these. It's called the rhetorical triangle. If you look at the little diagram at the bottom, and the three corners of the triangle are called logos, ethos, and pathos. And there's no order to them because it's a triangle. Let me give you the definitions of each of those. So it's not a hierarchy, but they all work together to help create and prove your argument or your analysis. So logos are appeals to audiences' reason and common sense. And logos relies on reasoned opinion and factual data. Ethical proof, or ethos. This type of proof appeals to the audience's judgments about the creator of the text. And so the writer or designer or creator must demonstrate good character, credibility, and goodwill toward the audience to establish good ethos. So we think about ethos in terms of who created the text that we are analyzing. Now, when we're thinking about ethos in writing our own argument, you as the writer have to establish your own ethos. But for our purposes for this paper, you're examining the ethos of the ad itself. And then finally, emotional proof, or pathos. And that is, this type of proof appeals to the feelings of the audience. Personal examples, personal stories, vivid description. How can you make the audience feel? How do the creators of the ad do that? And conversely, when you're writing your own argument, how do you do that when you're writing to persuade? So these are the three types of proof and the rhetorical triangle: logos, ethos, pathos. So this is just a little interim slide to introduce you to the 4 kinds of logical proofs that I'm going to discuss a little bit. Cause and effect, analogy, which is comparison between two things, definition, and statistics facts. There are certainly other logical proofs, but most all of them are subsidiaries of these 4. That is, they fall underneath the category of these 4. These are all ways to reason. These are all ways to logically prove an argument. And when you're analyzing the ad, how do the authors use logical proof? When you're creating your own paper, how do you use logical proof? So think about that in the next 2 essays that we're writing. But for this essay, for the analysis paper, how does the author use logical proof? What you want to do in logical proof is, for these ads, consider the writing in the ads, particularly for the first 2. All 3 of them also, I'm not sure about the third one, sorry, but I know the first 2 send you to a website. But also think about other things within logical proof that these advertisements do to help persuade and draw in their viewers. So cause and effect is one mode of logical proof. It also lines up with chapter 37 in the Norton Field Guide. So I'm talking about cause and effect both as logos and as one of the strategies for writing. Analyzing a cause would be examining what triggers something else. And analyzing effects would be examining the results. So the words why, because, effect, cause, result, consequence, etc. all indicate the writer is arguing from cause and effect. And when we are analyzing or arguing, we are, remember, considering causes or effects that are plausible, not proven. So if we know that the effect of something scientifically is something else, the effect of gravity, or the cause of, COVID, although we don't know that yet, but the effects or the symptoms, all of those are scientific. But when we argue from cause and effect, we're only arguing or analyzing based on things that aren't proven. Remember, we're talking about claims here. We're not talking about something that's a fact. So, for instance, analyzing the World Wildlife Fund ad for cause and effect could discuss the effect of habitation loss and human destruction of habitats for animals based on the shark's disappearance in the second picture. So you could be discussing the effect of that picture on us, on how it's originally a pun and we see it as that. Why would it be more horrifying not to see a shark? And then it sort of occurs to us, oh, the effect is that it's damaging to our oceans, to our ecosystem. Analyzing the cause of the marriage ad could examine the cultural need for marriage strengthening, as well as the ideals of me versus we in our society. So we look at that ad, we see what it asks us to do. It's almost like a little arts and crafts thing, which again leads us to the idea of we. And so we can analyze the cause of the creation of that ad. Now, the effect of that ad would be something different. The effect of that ad would be for us to go to the website and actually work on strengthening our marriage. The cause of the ad is why that ad was created to begin with. So there are some ideas on cause and effect in analysis and argument. Another type of logical proof is analogies, which we can also put under the heading of comparison and contrast, which is chapter 40 in our book. Now, analogies and comparison and contrast are not identical, but I'm going to talk about them similarly because they do have some similar definitions. So analogies are comparisons between two things. And analogies are really only short paragraphs or sentences. They're more types of figurative language than they are long drawn out comparisons, which are more what we see in chapter 40. There are three different kinds of analogies. You can have a historical example comparing two things. You could compare two literal things that are in the same category, or you could compare two figurative things that the author creates. So, are there analogies created implicitly in the ads? McDonald's perhaps compares other restaurants without free Wi-Fi to itself, persuading readers to go there not just to eat, but for the free Wi-Fi. The World Wildlife Fund perhaps compares the horrifying nature of a world without animals to one with animals, creating a kind of pun where we would initially think that a world with sharks is horrifying, but one without is even more so. So that literal analogy is two different kinds of worlds based on both human dehabitation and global warming, things that are happening to the earth as we speak. In writing a comparison, so if you look in chapter 40, you can see that there are two different types of writing full-length comparisons. And these full-length comparisons will be something that you perhaps do when you're writing next week your persuasive essay, so your essay that takes a position. So you can use as a writer the block method of comparing two things, which is discussing each item separately, giving information on one item, perhaps in one paragraph, and then on another. Or you can use the point-by-point method, which is to compare specific points together specifically in the same paragraph. So that's something I will likely bring up again when we talk about arguing a position, is how you can perhaps use comparison between two things, whether it's a historical comparison, a literal, or a figurative, to help create proof, remember logical proof, for your argument. And definition is another type of proof that goes under the rubric or heading of logos. Definition goes along with the strategy in chapter 41 of writing your own definitions. Here, we're thinking about analyzing definitions perhaps as we analyze the ads. So a reader and a writer, so the audience and the creator or the writer, must agree on key terms in an argument. And if key terms are not agreed upon, the claim is more difficult or impossible to prove. Definitions could be analyzed in a paper based on the creator's use of a word or term. And so analyzing the definition of marriage, for instance, might be helpful in the marriage ad, or analyzing climate change, or something of that nature. So definition could come in handy as a mode of logos. Remember, logical, reasonable proof that authors or creators use to identify with the audience and to draw the audience in to persuade and to make their case. And the final type of logos I'm going to talk about is statistics and facts. So rhetorical proof from logos also uses reasoning based on statistics and data quantitatively. Americans often use numbers as proof and have faith in them. So statistics, data, and facts will certainly be something you use when you create your own argument. But it is something that is implicit and actually in the WWF ad, fairly factual in the ad itself. They can, however, statistics and data, be interpreted in different ways by different people depending on who is writing the argument. For example, we know the statistic that about half of Americans get divorced. That statistic has been the same for probably 40 to 50 years now. What people don't know about that statistic, however, is the number includes all divorce, people who have been divorced multiple times. The statistics for divorce of first-time marriages are actually lower than 50%. But if you take all marriages together, that includes first-time divorces plus those who have been divorced 7 times, then you come up with a 50% number. So although I don't think there are any statistics in the writing that we see in the ads, and you likely will not be analyzing statistics. Um, it is a fact that habitats are um, being destroyed by um, human causes in the ocean. It's a fact that marriages probably need strengthening. Of course, I use the word probably and I use the fact together. So, statistics and facts are not something that you'll likely be analyzing a lot in this paper. But when you get to your own argument to prove a case that you make about a particular cultural issue in the next paper and you're proving a position, then you'll likely use statistics and facts more. But if you go to the websites on these particular ads, then you would see statistics, facts, and examples that the creators want you to see to help prove their point. So statistics and facts are the last part of Logos that I'll discuss. Overall, we had analogies, definitions, causes and effect, and statistics. Okay, the second part of the rhetorical triangle is called ethos, or proof that builds credibility of the creator, the writer, the author, or the designer. Again, that's called ethos. It makes the writer or speaker credible, deriving from the word ethics, based on one's character and reputation. The question to ask is what makes the writer, creator, or designer trustworthy? So a few ideas concerning that are to use specialized language when necessary, don't use cliches or improper grammar, do enough research, establish credentials as an organization. So you may be analyzing the credibility of the ad based on actually going to the website. You may be analyzing the grammar of the writing. You may be analyzing the trustworthiness of the group that's creating the ad. You may be analyzing the credentials of each of the groups. So those are the kinds of things to think about with ethos. When you're writing your own argument, then you're creating your own ethos through all of these things. So you are doing enough research. You are using specialized language. You are using proper grammar. You are crafting a tone that is appropriate. Think of the tone of the first ad for WWF versus the third ad for McDonald's. The tone of the McDonald's ad is much more lighthearted and less serious because the notion of our decreasing habitat and therefore, changing the world in some horrific ways is much different from offering free Wi-Fi at a restaurant. So they've created different tones in order to draw their audience in. And that's something that you'll do depending on the subject that you write in your own argument paper. And finally, we have the third part of the rhetorical triangle, and that is proof that concerns emotion, called pathos. Pathos, or pathos, whichever way you want to pronounce it, is a quality or experience that arouses emotion. It includes both sympathy, which of course means feeling sad or compassion for someone when you are on the outside of the situation, and empathy, feeling similar emotions based on shared experiences. So what you want to do is analyze how the author or the creator of the ad excited your emotions. Did they use certain kinds of images, colors, words, etc. to make those emotions come alive for the audience? What are you passionate about personally, and does that translate into the image you are looking at? And finally, when you as a writer use pathos, you may use personal experiences, vivid details, anecdotes, small narratives, etc., and other examples that appeal to your audience's emotions. So pathos deals with emotion, ethos deals with credibility, logos deals with reason and logic. All three of those are essential to understanding a thesis-driven essay. That is not one that's based on facts. And they're also essential to write an analysis and to understand a visual text, such as an advertisement that you're looking at. So this is why we're talking about chapter 38, which is arguing, before we actually get to the paper that you're writing that's a solid argument. This analysis paper has elements of argument because your thesis is an interpretive thesis. So let me know if you have any questions. Bye bye.